Bird Blues. That was Freight Train by Tommy Flanagan, I think. And we're gonna learn that one, and then two more so-called bird blues heads. Then I'll show you two exercises that I think are really good for practicing or learning how to, or getting better at soloing over these so-called bird changes. And at the end of the video, I will give you some advice on how I think you should practice this stuff. So yeah, bird blues, let's get into it, shall we? So first off, what the hell is bird blues? So let's go to the Wikipedia page. Bird changes, the blues for Alice changes, also bird changes, bird blues, or New York blues changes, is a chord progression often named after Charlie Parker, Bird. So let's just go through the, I'm sure you know this, but the so-called evolution of the blues. So the Wikipedia does a good job here. If we have a blues in C, right? Just a regular blues. No-brainer. Then we have this more elaborate version of it, which jazz musicians like to play, called a jazz blues. So it's basically the same thing, just so-called quick change. So a few more chords, instead of going to the 5 chord, they go to do a 2-5 there. And then they set up that 2-5 with the dominant, or the 2 chord, the 5 of 2. There are very slight variations on this, right? Sometimes you play a 2-5 to the F, and then maybe F diminished, F sharp diminished. And you can play C, F, E. There are many variations of this, right? But you're still kind of feeling the blues, if you know what I mean. Like you could play, for example, a blues head like that could work over both these changes. I've talked about this in I've made many videos on jazz blues, that a lot of these jazz blues heads, you could play the chords of a regular blues behind them, or a jazz blues. You could hear like a bona fide blues player play over these changes, like Robert Cray or somebody like that. For example, Let the Good Times Roll by Ray Charles is a jazz blues, even though it's not jazz, right? It's more of a blues. Now we get into the bird blues. We get even more intricate with the chords. So this is a series of 2-5-1s. Leading to the 4 chord. And these chromatic 2-5s. We're gonna talk about these chords. If you watch my latest video on Dance of the Infidels, we talked about this 2-5, that it's actually better to play the 1 chord there. We'll get to that. But that's the bird blues chord progression. The bird blues changes. So what is a head? Well, everybody knows this one. Blues Blues for Alice. So I'm sure most of you know this already, but let's play it anyway. It's always good to kind of keep up these old bebop heads, the Charlie Parker heads. They need maintenance. So these tabs and PDFs are on my Patreon page, of course. So that was Bird Blues. Let's play along with a more exciting backing track than MuseScore. Let's find a backing track. This is a pretty good backing track. This was channeled Phil Wilkinson is using like organ backing tracks. Blues for Alice. Most of you know that tune. It's funny because all the jazz schools tell you about the jazz blues and then there's bird blues, but it's like there's only like one tune, bird blues. So then some people know about Freight Train, the one that we looked at or the one that I played in the beginning there. So let's learn that one. It's in A flat. So this one you should probably play a little bit faster because some of those notes are a little bit dissonant. There's like a major 7 on the minor chord. So if you play it fast, it sounds better. The backing track I was using there is from a channel called Eagleheart Jazz Channel. So this is a pretty good backing track here.
1, 2, 3.
Cool, like the blues phrase at the end. So this is on that album, the Kenny Burrell and John Coltrane album. So you have to listen to that if you haven't already. Most of you probably listened to it. And just try to learn some of that stuff, transcribe some of it. Very, very important album for jazz guitar. Then there's one more, a little bit more obscure Charlie Parker head called Laird Baird. Is that what it's called? Like, I don't know if I'm saying that right. I don't know what that means. very Parkery. It's one of those heads that who knows if he wrote this or if it was something he just played, like improvised at the moment. Regardless, it's still very, very good to study these things because you get an understanding of his, how he kind of, the techniques that he uses to maneuver through these changes, and understanding Charlie Parker is kind of the key thing if you want to learn how to play bebop, of course. And it's kind of difficult to apply to the guitar, so you have to kind of figure out how you're gonna, what fingerings to use and stuff like that. It's a little bit of a challenge, of course, but necessary one. So I need to find a backing track for this, so I'm gonna use iReal Pro, and I'm gonna actually take the backing track for Blues for Alice and change the key to B flat. I'm gonna set the background to a Salsa Cuba Montuno, just why the hell not? One more time. Let's play along with the Mew score here too. Yeah, I need to work on that. So now I want to give you some exercises. We were talking about this in the last Zoom meeting with my patrons, and they were asking, somebody was asking about the Barry Harris scales and bop scales, and of course you can do all that stuff. I'm not sure of how exactly Barry Harris would use his chord scales over this tune. So Chris, if you're watching, let us know what are the chord scales for Bird Blues according to Barry Harris. But there's a better way for these changes to practice, even though you should practice that stuff too. And that is to use the ideas from this book, Melodic Structures by Jerry Bergonzi. One of my favorite books. I've made videos about this and I've talked about this concept many times. So it's so-called Coltrane Patterns. So for major chords, 1, 2, 3, 5. For minor chords, it's 1, flat 3, 4, 5. So if it's a minor 7 flat 5, it's 1, 3, 4, flat 5. And if it's a dominant with a flat 9, it's 1, flat 9, 3, 5. So let me reiterate: 1, 2, 3, 5. Then we have a split chord, so 1, 3, flat 3, 4, flat 5, 1, flat 2, 3, 5. I would play like this. Just like with the Barry Harris chord scales, this keeps everything in the rhythm, which is, you can kind of hear the changes go by. So notice here that when it goes to the back after the 4 chord, 4 minor, I play F here instead of A minor. So if the chord is A minor, is functioning as a tonic. I talked about this in my previous video of Dance of the Infidel, so I'm not gonna explain it again. But this 3 chord is a 1 chord. It functions as a tonic, so I can play F. So I think that sounds better than if I play A minor D7, which gives more of a 2-5 chromatic. You can do that too, right? Some people disagree with this, but there's no... One thing about jazz is that I'm allowed to do what I want, and this is apparently what Barry Harris thinks of this chord change too. So if it's good enough for Barry Harris, it's good enough for me. So let's go back to the Phil Wilkinson backing track. I'll put a link to that, and then play these chord tones. I was kind of changing things around. You could play, or you can play 2 notes from the pattern, or 3 notes, or 1 or no note. And this book goes through all the combinations, and it's also like much more. You can superimpose different of these permutations over other chords, just like you can with normal arpeggios. And you can play inversions of them. I've talked about this a lot. This is what got everything started for me with jazz books. A piano player gave me, he had a lot of the Jerry Bergonzi books, and he gave them to me because he was frustrated with them. And his complaint was that the backing tracks, there comes with backing tracks, CDs of really, really good playing. But the tempos were too fast, so you couldn't. That was his complaint, which is a legitimate complaint, because this was before iReal Pro and, you know, Amazing Slowdowner and all the apps where you could change tempos. But anyway, so I practiced a lot of this. I wrote down the dates here. I've been practicing in December. No, that's February 2003. I was practicing this page. So Blues for Alice has a lot of this stuff in it. Kind of. That's an inversion of it. That's one of those. So it is not something, just a theory concept that Jerry Bergonzi came up with. It's derived from bebop vocabulary, bebop language. And then there is another little Coltrane inspired pattern that I came up with, It's play a triad, but start from the flat 5. You know how Coltrane often played that pattern. So I play 1.5 step below the 5th. Again, treating that A minor as an F. Let's try that. now you have three heads in different keys and 2 exercises that you can work on these. So what I want you to do is to take these 3 heads and learn all of them in those 3 keys. So use your iReal Pro, I guess, to slowly. So when you transpose, you have to figure out how the notes relates to the chords and the changes. Because the problem here, as always, is that we're learning. By the way, that he doesn't play that right. The version I've heard is, but the real book says, and that's what everybody plays. Maybe there are several recordings of that tune, I don't know. But anyway, so you learn it like just memorizing fingerings, but you're not really thinking about how the notes outline those chord changes. But if you transpose it to B flat, you have to okay, so it starts on the root. It's a triad in first inversion, and then the 7th. That's another triad. So okay, then it goes. That's the surrounding the 3rd of the secondary dominant to the 6th chord, right? So okay. That's the 3rd of. Right, so then I have to think about, and you should think about how the notes relate to the chord. And then you don't have to do it fast. And then you do those 3 exercises, or the Coltrane patterns and the other Coltrane pattern over those. So some people get super excited. It's like, I'm gonna do all keys. I'm gonna do this. That, there's only that many hours in a day. So if you want to do that, then go crazy, go bananas. That's great, but you don't have to do that. At some point, it's a good idea to learn one Charlie Parker head or something and really go through all keys. I know a lot of jazz musicians, they work on playing Donna Lee and B and E major, stuff like that, just to really make sure that you learn the heads, not just from a fingering perspective or memorization, but you actually know how those melodies are constructed over and how they outline the changes. So that's your assignment. That's going to be my assignment for the future and for the near future. And let me know if you think this is a good idea. Then there are some jazz tunes that have kind of similar changes that are kind of similar to bird blues, like Confirmation, and a few other tunes like that. Dance of the Infidels that we looked at in the previous video, which is basically a bird blues but with a little bit more like sub 5 and stuff like that. And so I'm gonna make an upcoming video, I think, a future video on those types of tunes like Confirmation. Confirmation could actually be a video in and of itself, so we shall see. But yeah, that was Bird Blues. PDFs on my Patreon page. Thank you for your time and attention. I shall see you next time.